Good afternoon, everybody. My name is J.D. Sherry. I'm Vice President of Technology and Solutions with Trend Micro. Thanks for joining us today. I know compliance might not be right at the top of your list to come and hear a talk about, but I think it's important and certainly prudent based on what a lot of the things that we're doing within the AWS cloud. Certainly, from my experience, the notion of compliance and doing that in a secure fashion when you're moving really, really fast to transform your business and roll out infrastructure in such a dynamic platform as AWS has to come into consideration when we're looking at doing this. And when we talk today about compliance in the cloud, I think a couple of key things are going to be important for us to all understand. And for those of you that were in our talk previously, we mentioned some things, and there'll be a little bit of a continuation of our discussion that we had at 1:30 around products, capabilities, processes to enable you to be even more effective from a compliance standpoint within your organizations in the cloud. And certainly Trend Micro is focused on this to empower you all to BYOC, if you will. Everybody's familiar with the BYOD phenomenon. I often talk about bringing your own controls, bringing your own compliance to the cloud. In addition to the great things that AWS has done to improve the security fabric, okay? They've gone through the approach of also getting the certifications that can validate those steps, all right? If you look at the PCI level capabilities that they afford you, if you look at the FedRAMP certification for anybody that's in U.S. government, federal government, you understand that process to become a cloud service provider and an authorized cloud service provider can be pretty rigorous and pretty intense. They've gone through that and are an authorized cloud service provider. So they are backing up the claims of being a very, very secure fabric. What we want to be able to do is continue the discussion about how you can layer on top of that. Everybody in the security industry knows, and if you're not a security professional, you understand defense in depth and layered security is a good approach. And we're going to talk about how to use tools to be able to do that. And the other key thing around compliance in the cloud in particular is security. When you start to incorporate that into your infrastructure, in the traditional sense, can often be an obstacle to performance, certainly can be an obstacle from a human resource standpoint, and many times it gets slighted because it can be difficult to implement, it can be problematic from a resource contention standpoint. We've taken at Trend Micro a real serious look at engineering more effective solutions to be able to be optimized and tuned and be able to run effectively in AWS and not really deter you from layering on security within the cloud to manage your compliance challenges. So real briefly, I'm going to be joined by my colleague Mark Nunnikoven, who's actually going to get into the deep security platform and show you how we can enable you to be successful from a compliance standpoint and actually do a demo that kind of walks you through some of our offerings in the deep security platform as well as our secure cloud product, which is our encryption product. The compliance issues that I've faced in my career, I've been heavily involved as a government service provider. My former role, I was head of technology for a company that does the .gov infrastructures for many of the states in which you reside in, 29 of the 50 .govs I think they're up to now, building applications, hosting infrastructure, security, and payment processing. So I have gone through PCI Level 1 assessments and had to implement infrastructures to be able to comply with that. So I have a background there. And prior to going to that particular government service provider, I also worked for Honeywell, which managed the contract for the Department of Energy building essentially 85% of the non-nuclear components in nuclear weapons. So I've been around top secret sensitive data and protecting that infrastructure from an IT and a process standpoint. So compliance is kind of in my DNA, and I've got some good experience with that. Happy to share that with you today, and then also talk to how you can incorporate some of these tools and these solutions to make your life a little bit easier when your auditors come around. And this really has quite the span when you look at the verticals that we're in, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in banking or finance, whether you're in pharmaceuticals. These things all kind of cross the gamut when it comes to compliance and what we have to do. And even if you're a small startup, we have a lot of those in attendance today. Nearly I think 10,000 people at this massive conference. It's just amazing. Those individuals in which you serve, your customers, are going to rely on you to protect their billing information, to protect their credit card information, or maybe even some of their sensitive information in which you process that's unique to them. So we have to take that into consideration when we're engineering this into our solutions and have a great responsibility to be good data stewards when we're deploying services in the cloud. And then last but not least, you know, the main focus of the human resource element. I can't emphasize enough the amount of time it takes to effectively put in compliance and controls can be pretty daunting. Solutions have to be focused on enabling the human resource element to be effective so we don't have ultimately a negative attitude and aspect towards security, which traditionally we can have. It's too important, it's too critical, and when you have compliance challenges on the line, we've got to factor in the human resource element. So a couple of key things when I'm talking with partners and customers globally, in particular in the regions that are really, really focused on AWS and leveraging cloud-based services, a couple of key concerns come up. Data sovereignty is a big one, okay? How can we wrap our data to not only protect it from other tenants that are residing in our multi-tenant capability, right? Other neighbors, cohabitors of the cloud-based services. How can I encrypt that technology and manage the keys from a public-private key, split key, dual control perspective to not only become compliant but then get segmentation across that? The other thing that they talk about at Amazon certainly does a great job in their protocols is the notion of data that's on disk drives that potentially get discarded, right? Amazon's got a great policy around degaussing drives. It's well known that they're able to do that. The other things we talk about customers is go ahead and create an encryption layer on that, wrap it, so no matter what happens with that drive, you're covered, right? The data is rendered useless. So the conversation in Germany also is very interesting when it comes to data sovereignty and keys, with the keys basically residing within that customer's premise, for example. They felt that that was a good enough piece to show that no matter where the data is, if they had the key and they managed the key on premise, that was good enough for them to discern that they had enough segmentation, that would pass a lot of their privacy laws, or over in the UK, privacy laws, to be able to manage that, and that was good enough for them. So that's a big one. Multi-tenancy that I talked about comes up quite often. Ensuring you can create segmentation for your instances and certainly manage that. And even customers that are starting to do IT as a service, right? Internal IT shops. You're going to be able to go ahead and need a multi-tenancy capability and overlay your security solutions that mimic the things that you're able to do within Amazon and provide that additional multi-tenancy capability. These are all key things that we look at when we're discerning compliance and governance requirements. So PCI, how many in here have gone through or are PCI level merchant or service provider in the room? Okay, I'm assuming that's a big reason why you're here today, is to learn a little bit more about compliance. So this is a document that came out, and PCI, in a pretty good cadence, updates their documents, their guidance, whether it's for virtualization technologies, whether it's for cloud technologies. And this was a good one that came out in February around cloud and how you can map that and overlay that with the PCI DSS. So I advise you to take a look at that. It's also going to get into the shared security model, what AWS provides you as far as the outside, the protection, the physical infrastructure, the networking, things like that. And then ultimately your responsibility to bring additional countermeasures to the table and best practices to help you with those compliance challenges. All right? And that's the shared responsibility model. What you're going to be required to do on the operating system level, access, and application tiers. So again, this is the shared responsibility that we speak. We are in this jointly, obviously, with Amazon and AWS. And ultimately, I think it's a tremendous amount of effort on their part to create this large ecosystem, bake in security elements into the fabric, and then provide us as consumers of the service. And Trend Micro obviously is running our deep security as a service platform on AWS. You running your particular solutions and products and services through their fabric to be able to bring your own tools and integrate them from an optimized standpoint where you're going to get maximum security, but you're not going to get severe performance impacts because it's engineered to run effectively in the cloud. Okay? So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Nunnekoven, and Mark's going to dive in a little bit deeper into our product called Deep Security. He's got tremendous experience on this platform, working with our over 3,000 customers that are running this in AWS and internally. And we're going to see a little bit about the product and what it can do for compliance. All right, Mark.
Thanks, JD. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Going to talk a little bit more about the shared responsibility model, and then I'm going to introduce you to the products that we have that are focused and optimized for AWS to help you meet these compliance challenges that JD's introduced to us. So the shared responsibility model, you probably heard it already within the reInvent. This is the structure under which we provide security within the AWS cloud. And we, I mean all of us as customers, as vendors, as consumers of AWS, and AWS themselves. So what the model is really straightforward. The slide's nice and simple. The model is nice and simple. It's right down the middle. AWS is responsible for facilities, the physical security, the physical infrastructure, your network infrastructure, your virtualization layer, right? That's what we as consumers of the service pay them to secure. From a compliance perspective, they're really transparent about how they provide this security. So you can check their website. It's /security. They have a few white papers as well as audit evidence for your compliance to show how they handle the data center. So your SOC 1, SOC 2, that kind of thing. That is all available from them, and if it's not there to the level you need, you can file a ticket and they'll provide it for you. But where it really gets interesting in the shared responsibility model is as a user of this service, what you need to do, and that's the right-hand column. So we need to secure the operating system. We need to secure the applications that we're running in AWS. We need to do proper account management and configure the security groups and the network configuration that we provide. And since you guys have already been immersed at least in a day and a half of reInvent, you probably noticed that the bottom three are actually functionality that AWS themselves provides, but us as consumers of that service are responsible to understand how it works. So we need to know how to use IAM properly. We need to know how to use security groups and how to configure them properly and how to do proper VPC construction. So that's the shared responsibility in a nutshell. And we're going to talk about now how Trend Micro can help you address the operating system component and the application layer. So we have our main control platform is called Deep Security. And it's two pieces. There's Deep Security Manager, which we can run for you as Deep Security as a service, as JD already mentioned. That's a service we run entirely in AWS, and we're going to be talking about that and the story behind that tomorrow. But for today, we need to know that's the management piece. That's your policy orchestration. That's where you start to say, I need the following controls. I need firewall running. I need content filtering. I need anti-malware, intrusion prevention, file integrity, things like that. You're defining your rules in the manager. And then the second piece that comes into play is the Deep Security Agent. So this is a binary that's going to be dropped on your EC2 instance, and it does all the heavy lifting. So we set the policy up top in the manager, and then the agent is doing all the work after it gets what it needs to do. So it gets its marching orders from the manager, and off it goes. So what does this deliver to us? So we know the high-level structure. If you dive into it, what you see is it's a single pane of glass to control all of your security policy regardless of where your EC2 instances are running. So if you're a multi-region deployment and have security groups across in your AWS regions, no problem. What you're going to see is all your additional security controls are going to be available through one console, and that's that Deep Security Manager. So that's a huge win for people who are deploying globally, and you get a real ease of use out of that, which is great. So we also have broad platform support. We're going to see that a bit when we dive into the demo. Don't worry, I'm not going to just keep slides all day. We're going to dive in and show some stuff working. And you see we have broad platform support. Our target internally is actually the whole first page of the EC2 launch wizard. And that's what we've hit. So you see Amazon Linux there, you'll see Oracle Linux, Windows, Ubuntu LTS, all that is available. So the agent, like we mentioned, provides all the protection on the EC2 instance. It's the big worker here. And where this comes into play for you looking to reach compliance is it helps you address these challenges directly because it's your technical enforcement of your security policy. So that's deep security in a nutshell. And so one of the things we talk about to customers, and JD mentioned, BYOC, and I guess if we're going backwards, I'm going to say BYOB, which is, of course, bring your own binary. And in this case, that's the Deep Security Agent. So a lot of people say, you know what, I don't want to manage another binary on my system. And unfortunately, the technical realities of how the AWS cloud functions is to get those advanced security controls on your instance, you have to have another binary. So what we did when we were designing deep security, we looked at it and said, what can we do to make that absolutely the easiest process possible for you guys as clients? So and you'll see it in a second here, we have functionality within the GUI to help you build out custom scripts that you can drop into Chef, that you can drop into Puppet. If you want to go old school and SSH right into a box or PowerShell into a box and run some commands, you can do that as well. So our approach here was essentially, we don't want to tell you how to deploy our agent. You already know how you run your deployments in the AWS cloud. We just want to slide right in, and so it's seamless. You can add a couple lines to your deployment scripts already, and you're done. So we're going to see that, I think, right now. We're going to do a little laptop switcheroo here. And always a good professional speaker move. Drop below the podium so no one can see you. I'm just going to plug in. We're going to switch over, and we're going to do that. We're going to deploy. There we go. Always nice when it works the first time. So what you're seeing right here is the Deep Security Manager console. And if you see on the left here, I have a piece called the Cloud Connector. And I've got one set up for all of my AWS regions. And in this case, we're zoomed in on Tokyo. The one thing I always enjoy about reInvent is if you look at the response times for everything, everyone tends to hammer US East once all day. So we're going to demo out of Tokyo because we're seeing a little faster response times out of there. But I already have a few instances running in here. I've got one that's already protected. You see the good old green light system. Try to keep it simple. This one's managed online, and it's being protected by deep security. I have two of these instances that are actually not being protected by deep security. So I've got some awareness as to what's going on here, which is a big advantage of our Cloud Connector piece. We're going to poll in the background and see what's running in your EC2 region. And in this case, if I'm in the security team, on the ops team, I'm asking, okay, which developer fired these up and didn't add any protection? Before, you didn't have that visibility. Now, because I managed to get the read-only rights to that AWS account, I can see them. And in this case, because I know they actually do have the agent on them, I can fire off a request from the manager out to the agent to activate it. So this is one option. If you have the agent pre-baked into your AMI, and it's deployed and it's installed, in this case, what we're doing is now that we see it, we're going to send out the request and say, hey, activate. So you can see it switched to activating, and it's running the process. And while that's happening, what we're going to do is show you another way of deploying the agent out. So didn't even get to finish that sentence, and they're managed and protected online. And then we can apply policy and add additional controls on top of that. So if I wanted to bring a specific policy under these guys, I can simply go and assign the policy. If I go down, of course, there we go. There we are. I can pull up the details for this guy specifically and start to add additional controls in. So I can turn on the firewall. I can turn on advanced intrusion prevention. And of course, a lot of customers end up saying, well, why am I going to add a firewall in here if I already have security groups? You do not have to turn on each module. You can. There are significant advantages, and where we see deep security have a lot of success specifically around compliance is our firewall does full logging. So for compliance challenges, that's normally one of the big checkboxes. If you have a firewall running, you need to be logging all your accepted connections. You can do that easily. It's one rule within deep security. So here I could add additional intrusion prevention rules if we wanted to. And we have a huge rule library that's preset. You can also build out your own if you wanted to as well. And it's as simple as selecting a rule, clicking OK, and it will send that policy update down to that machine. So back to where we were going initially with the deployment. That was just one where I sent the manager to activate out. What we can do to integrate into your deployment challenges is we have a feature called deployment scripts. So I simply go to Help, and then to the deployment scripts menu, and this is going to pull up a handy little dialog. It's a little bit of a wizard to help you build out that script. So what we do is we say we want to deploy an agent, and we are going to pick our platform. So in this case, we're going to pick from the multitude of platforms that we support from Deep Security as a Service. And we simply select, and in this case, I can pick Windows, and it's going to start to build out my deployment script. So now it's got some PowerShell commands in here to download the agent and install it. I'm going to ask it to also activate that agent, which is going to give me additional options. So now it's downloaded it, now it's activating it, and I'm going to pick a default policy to deploy at the same time. In this case, I'll just pick my demo policy. And so it's created this PowerShell script that I can simply copy and paste and drop into EC2 user data. I could put it into a Chef recipe, into a Puppet manifest, whatever I use, it works very simply. The nice thing about this feature within the GUI is if I wanted Linux, I can simply switch to Linux and it changes that script into a bash script. So I'm going to take all that, I'm going to simply select it all, and I'm going to copy it. So I'll show you the easy way to deploy this as far as everyone's concerned is the basic EC2 management console. I'm just going to go to the launch wizard. I'm going to pick Amazon Linux, 64-bit. And I'm going to just launch a micro because they're nice and quick. We'll say I'll fire up 5 new micros. We scroll down. We go to the little magic user field here. This is the user data field. This leverages a feature called Cloud Init. And what that does is that takes all this data, I sent it in the clipboard, so I just pasted our deployment script directly in. And this top line here says this is an executable script. In this case, it's a bash script. That's a common scripting language on Linux platforms. So as soon as this goes to our instance, that feature, Cloud Init, is going to take it. It's going to look at that first line and say, hey, I need to execute the following. And what it's going to do is download our agent, install the agent, and then register it with the deep security. So it's going to activate it and apply those protections. So we simply continue along the wizard. So we are fine with default storage. We're going to give it a nice EC2 tag. We'll call it demo. Configure our security group. In this case, I'm going to pick an existing group. Scroll down, give my demo group. And then I'll launch. Of course, after I review, you'll notice all the GUIs always review to make sure you made the right choices. And I'm going to launch that. I'll pick my key pair. Quite happy they changed the GUI on this that reminds you need to keep hold of your key pair. That's sort of the keys of the castle to get back in your instance. I'll launch it up, and you'll see, hopefully, I get the confirmation that I have 5 new instances running. And what you're going to see back in deep security is that as those come online, and this is always interesting given the amount of effort or the amount of workload going on in the different regions in EC2. As they go online or as the Cloud Connector syncs automatically, you're going to see these come in to protect under deep security. And as I confidently walk away from the podium, you'll know that I'm not actually going to touch anything. So if this backfires, I'll be running back to the podium quickly. Basically what happens for our Cloud Connectors, it's set to do a regular sync. So every 5-10 minutes, it syncs back and says, is there anything new running in EC2? But what we also did was, and I'll walk back away from the podium, just to make sure. What we also did is write it intelligently, that the first time it sees an agent register from that region, it will also sync to find the rest of them. So when this works, what you're going to see is that the first agent's going to come online, and it's probably going to have an activated status or generating credentials or something along that structure. And then the others are going to be there. You'll see them listed. Some may have the agent already going. Some may be in the process. And this is entirely dependent on what happens with EC2. So when you launch EC2, I'm sure you've noticed the more instances you ask for, the longer it takes to start them kicking off. So as soon as they start to kick off, then you're going to see that they will start their boot up period. So they get assigned their networking, they get assigned their operating system starts to boot up. There we go, because I was running out of things that happen on first boot. And then what ends up going on is that as soon as they get their stack, it executes that Cloud Init. So once the instance, the operating system, you turn your system on, as soon as it starts running, it learns that Cloud Init. And so it's going to go and it's going to execute that script. It's going to download the deep security agent, and then it's going to install it, and then it's going to send a request up to activate. So you see here that our Cloud Connector synced because it saw them all. We have them setting right now as the managed unknown. And then as soon as that it downloads and starts to install, you'll see 4 of them just jumped up. We still have this guy down at the bottom who's a little slow behind. He's going to be just finishing up his install and activate. So there, as I did not actually touch anything other than move the mouse cursor, all I had to do was paste that into the user data field, and we activated the instances. So we saw real quick 2 different ways to get the binary out there. If I had it pre-baked, I could just activate and it was up, or I could just drop it into the user data in the EC2 management console. Now, most of you probably don't actually use the web interface. That's all available through the APIs as well. You can send it base64 stuff, and up it goes. Or if you're using an orchestration tool, Chef, Puppet, GPOs, if it's your Windows shop, it all just drops right in. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible to bring your own binary to the party to add the compliance challenges. So I'm going to switch back to the other laptop, because that's always fun. And we're going to see another customer challenge. Let me just jump here. So we jumped 2 demos in 1. We went real fast. So we also talked about this. I'll just point to the slide real quick. Was the Cloud Connector really helps you be aware of those assets. So that's when we saw those 2 instances that weren't protected, but we knew about them. Because we've got that visibility, and JD talked about that earlier with Vodafone, was visibility is a key thing we see from a security perspective, especially from a compliance perspective. Now you can see that, hey, I had 2 instances. They were unprotected for 3 minutes until I got the agent out there. So back into a demo, and this one's not going to be live simply because it's too fast to actually show you live. So I've got a bit of a video to replay it here. So what we're going to show you now is a new feature that we have on Deep Security as a Service, and we actually just launched it this week. And what we do now is we use EC2 tags. So does everyone know what EC2 tags are? Yeah? Okay, even if you're not nodding, you actually do know. The default EC2 tag, for instance, is name. So what an EC2 tag is simply two values. It's a key and an actual value. So in this case, by default, when you're looking at the console, you'll see here that name is sort of their de facto standard tag, and we've given it a name web. You can also add additional tags, and they use that to start with consolidated billing. So you could do it by business unit and say, well, the dev group is tagged with these, and the quality assurance group is tagged with this, and it shows up in your bill and says, well, JD ran up a huge bill this month because this was his tag and we knew it. They've pushed those even further, and now they're a key piece of their security framework. So you're seeing that in IAM, which is the Identity and Access Management. You can now set policies based on tags. So I'm an admin, but only for machines that are tagged like the following. Well, we've pushed that into Deep Security as a Service as well. So now if you're tagging your instances and have a structure that you use operationally, we can take those tags to make intelligent decisions within Deep Security. So again, we're trying to make it easier and easier so you have to worry about less and less and can just focus on your business. So if we play this video, what you're going to see here is we've got 4 instances, if the video is going to play. There we go. All right, so we have 4 instances running. 2 web, 2 DB. The difference is that I have an environment tag. So this account actually shares production and development boxes in one area. So we've got it tagged environment development, environment production, and in this case, what I'm going to pause real quick here, is we've actually added an additional tag called encrypted. So in this case, what I'm doing is as an operator, I'm saying I want these machines to be encrypted. Okay? So when it shows up, I know this is a production database, and it should have encryption running. So what we're going to do is use that in Deep Security to apply a specific policy that's going to show us, it's going to verify that our other product, Secure Cloud, which is our encryption piece, is actually running, and if it's not, it's going to raise an alert for us. So we have those instance tags, and that's very common to see that sort of an environment tag to say this is a test instance, this is a production instance, and if you're running in if any of you are ops folks, you probably have a whole different rule set up for your development boxes. And you see here, this is back in Deep Security, and we've got different policies set. So I have an inheritance structure here where I've got a database policy, and I'm defining as much as I can in that policy. So here at the top, I'm saying I need anti-malware running, I need the following firewall rules running, I need certain intrusion prevention stuff running. Then I have a child policy that just has one extra rule that says Secure Cloud needs to be running. And I've done the same thing with development and production. So where you see this sort of policy structure and split is you'll divide out as much rules as high as you can to make it easy to manage, and then you'll put out specific things at the bottom saying, you know what, developers are allowed to FTP into this box because it's a dev box, and I let my devs do what they want in development. As soon as they get into production, then I jump on them, right? We all jump on our devs in prod because if not, they'll run wild on you. So here we're looking at that specific policy. We'll dive in a little bit and we'll see that rule. So this is our integrity monitoring module. And you see we have a rule configured to verify that the Secure Cloud agent is running and hasn't been tampered with. So now we go back and we're going to set up what's called an event-based task. So this is where the magic happens. This is where we take those EC2 tags and use them to make decisions. So we already have a couple rules set. So you see assign policy to dev servers, to production servers, and to DB servers. And then they assign the correlated policy within Deep Security. So we're going to make a new rule here. And we're going to open it up, and we're going to say we want to make a rule that is going to tag those encrypted instances and apply the right policy. So we're going to look for that encrypted tag, and if it's there, then assign the encrypted DB policy within Deep Security. So we select a new event-based task. We're going to say every time a new computer is created. So this is every time the cloud connector syncs and it sees a new computer, it's going to run this rule for us. So we select that. We move forward. We're going to say, OK, activate the computer. So every time you see a new computer created, activate it and assign the following policy. We're going to say assign this database encrypted policy. Then we're going to click over to the next, and we're going to keep going through. We're going to tell it the conditions under which we want that to happen. In this case, we're going to pick cloud instance metadata, which is our tags. We could have said security group for AWS or AMI ID or several other integrations we have in place. But in this case, we're going to say anytime we see a name that's DB, and that it has this encrypted tag and it's set to true, then we want to execute this task, which is assign the database encrypted policy. So we'll give it a nice name, and we'll put it back in, and we'll save it out. And once that's in place, now every time the Cloud Connector syncs and it sees a new machine, it'll go through these tasks and it sees what applies. So in our case, as soon as it sees a machine that has the name of DB and a tag that says encrypted and it's set to a value of true, then it's going to do the right thing. And you can see here, that's exactly what happened. The next time it's synced, and even in the video, it was hard to catch it right as it's happening because it tends to happen pretty quickly. You'll see that we have our DB. We also have our DB that's encrypted. So before, that just had the DB policy. Now it found that extra tag, and it added the additional policy. So that's a really excellent feature that helps you leverage what you're already putting in place with tags to make automated policy decisions within deep security. So that's a really useful feature that we actually just went live with in Deep Security as a Service. So just forgive me here as I do the laptop switcheroo again. So that's what we talked about there. Then that's a big customer challenge that we've seen. So let's talk a bit about Secure Cloud, which we just kind of introduced. So Secure Cloud adds to our deep security suite. And it is a separate product, but it's a very complementary product, and there's tight integration between the two. So before, where we had our Deep Security Manager and then we added the agents onto our EC2 instances, it's the same thing. We just have a key management. And we offer Secure Cloud as on-premise or as a service. We find with customers, especially with compliance challenges, Secure Cloud, the manager, is where the keys are held. That tends to be a touchy topic with a lot of people. So we offer a service where we will host the keys for you, and that's out of one of our high security data centers in Europe, or you can host it on your own premise if you want to. So either or, the technology is the same. It's up to you where you're comfortable holding those keys. So what is Secure Cloud? We already mentioned it really, really briefly, but what it is full disk encryption. And it's actually at the block level. So a question came up in the boot camp we held yesterday was, what file systems do you support on Linux for encryption? And the answer is all of them. We encrypt below the file system level. We go purely at the block. So if you want to run some crazy out there open source, some guy just wrote it now file system, that's fine with us. We never really consider it. We just look at the block and we encrypt right below it. So it is AES 256. It is FIPS 140-2 certified. So for compliance, that's normally a big check. Just be aware that that compliance certification is for the module that actually does the cryptography. So it is there. It does pass all of the compliance levels, but the GUI itself is not FIPS 40-2 because we rev the GUI so fast, we keep putting new policy and new things in place. But the actual crypto library is solid. It's been certified. It's been validated by FIPS. We also have broad platform support, and again, the agent, just like with deep security. So, as always, the generic, it helps you address your compliance challenges, which is great. But I think Secure Cloud does a lot more than that. And that's a big piece that we're going to dive into right now. Because a lot of people look at encryption, and it can be challenging. But where the challenge for encryption is really around policy management. Because encrypting a disk, I'll be perfectly honest with you, even though this is a sponsored session, every major operating system out there right now, you can turn an option on or install a little extra bit of freeware, and you can encrypt your disk. That's great. If you do that, I guarantee you, as soon as you get past 3 or 4 computers, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot with key management. The keys, for those of you unfamiliar with the cryptography, they are literally like the keys to the lock. So if you do not have the key, and you cannot get back into your data. And that's where Secure Cloud is focused. It's focused on easing that management of those keys for you. So, where this comes into for customer challenges, besides just compliance, it is extremely useful to prevent unauthorized access to your data. So we can do a few things to help you with that. We are announcing at this conference actually full boot volume encryption for Linux, so that's your base device, your boot device. We already had that for Windows, we now have it for Linux as well. And we have even tighter integration into the AWS metadata, so that you can base your key release policies based on metadata within AWS. So is it running in the right region? Was it the right AMI? Does it have the right instance role? If so, then release the key or don't release the key. So the big story here that we like to see, especially around compliance challenges, so PCI is obviously top of the mind, also for HIPAA, is integrity checking. So what Secure Cloud does is when it releases a key, it also does an integrity check, and it says, okay, I'm Mark, and I meet the following criteria. I'm a Canadian, I'm here at reInvent, okay, I can have the key. Great. But most products only check that once. For us, we do regular checks, and we call those an integrity check. So every once in a while, we'll go up and say, are those things still true? Like, have I migrated, have I immigrated to the US and I'm no longer Canadian, so I no longer get my key? We do that quite often. So what we see is with the integration between deep security is that you can set the rules to say, if my deep security anti-malware is no longer current, don't let them have their key. If a log inspection alert has raised, don't let them have their key. And where that's really useful is if I see, say, JD log into my box, I can raise an alert in log inspection and say, JD's not supposed to be accessing this box. And all of a sudden, that key gets revoked, and that data is safe. It's protected. That's a huge, huge bonus for security folks. So we've talked enough about it. Let's look at the product itself. So we're going to show you a bit about Secure Cloud right now. And like I said, I'll log in here. And then we'll show you the policy management structure. And that's really where the meat of the product is. And it's extremely flexible. And I'll show you some of the new features that we just announced this morning. So once this pulls up, so encryption is always hard to demo. Every time everyone asks me to demo it, it has to be the least sexy product on the planet to demo. But it is extremely effective. So you folks out there in the security world, you know once it's there, it is a solid control. And for us, it's all about policy. So for here, what we'll do is we'll create a demo policy, and then what you're going to see here is our options. So this is the criteria that we're going to say, if these are all met, then you're allowed to have your key. So for us, the first thing we're going to say is we're going to look at it, and we're going to say Trend Micro Deep Security needs to be there. So pretty simple criteria. Deep security is installed on this machine. It's met policy action number 1. Second thing we can say is it is running deep security, and deep security is actually all green. So everything's good. There's no alerts in deep security. You can keep specifying items and saying, well, web reputation needs to be on. Integrity monitoring needs to be on. So you can keep adding complexities into your policy to get more and more specific under which conditions you'll release your key and provide access to your data. So when you tie that back to PCI compliance, you can make sure that every control that you've assured your auditor is there. So you say, I will only allow these types of servers in this environment to run. You can match that with technical enforcement, full logging and full reporting on the back. So when they come and say, prove to me that you only allowed these machines that you said you would to have access to the data, you can spit out the report and you have solid evidence that that is being technically enforced, and auditors love it. So the last thing I want to show you is some of those AWS pieces. So if you go down to the bottom, you'll see we have cloud-specific rules for Amazon EC2. And here's where I can leverage some of the powerful features that we get from the metadata, so AMI, security group. The big one is IAM role. So AWS is pushing IAM roles very well. What they are is essentially groups for EC2 instances. That's a very high-level description. But essentially what you can do is start to provide access to other AWS resources to your EC2 instances without giving them credentials. So a year ago, we had to drop a secret key and an access key onto an EC2 instance. You no longer have to do that. You can do that with an IAM role. Well, we can tie into that to add that to your policy. So now you can tie your encryption pieces into your IAM role. So we're trying to keep pace with where AWS is going with their security, and we're integrating in, and that's a big one, and that's just launching today. So with that, I will bring back up JD to wrap things up for us. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mark. Good stuff. I think what we just showcased there really is what we talked about at the beginning of we've got to make this easy, okay, or easier, if you will, than the traditional approaches in which we've had to apply security to achieve some of the strictest compliance challenges we have. You know, I think I want to go back and focus on the summary, and then we're going to tee it up for questions, because I think we've got some good resources in here to kick around some of the lessons learned they've had in their compliance challenges. Maybe we can bounce some questions off each other, do some information sharing and collaboration today before you head off to your next session. But we talk smart, simple, and a strategy that fits. So, you know, Mark hit the nail on the head. You know, when we were going through PCI Level 1 audits, it seemed to be, for those of you that have gone through those, it seemed to be this kind of herding cats and this panic as the auditor would come on site, because you'd have to go in and not only show your controls, But then you'd have to go and do attestation to pull up the consoles in which you do antivirus, your web application firewall, logs, all of those things, encryption capabilities, what products, what techniques do you use, and can you support that? We just showed you 2 consoles that hit a mass majority of the PCI requirements that you have to deal with. And you're able to pull that particular management console up and basically show them, boom, here's all my instances that have antivirus on them. Here's my IPS capabilities for that host, which often we don't do because it can be impactful on the resource, right? Performance often takes a hit when we think about IPS. We don't have those major concerns with an integrated product and an integrated agent that's specifically engineered and designed to work on the AWS platform. File integrity monitoring. That in of itself is often a beast to try to implement. It's critical. It's a requirement. But why not be able to show that from a single console that you're able to manage that by policy in the instances that are within scope of your PCI requirements? And then the other piece we talk about is log inspection, right? Whether you're using Splunk within AWS or you're using Trend Micro's agent to do the same kind of single agent approach for log inspection. Single console that you can show your auditor. And then finally, we have the encryption capability. And you know, the interesting thing Mark brought up, it made me think of the phrase that encryption's easy, okay? It's decryption that is the hard part, right? And that's very, very true. So being able to showcase the policy, the attributes, the metadata in which you established your encryption strategy in a console for your auditors is another big win. And you'll be through that process rather quickly, much more quicker than you would have if you're pulling up multiple consoles and trying to do attestation through that. It seems to be kind of a 3-ring circus from times. One console would be very, very powerful. Bringing the encryption console in would be the second piece you'd take a look at. But we're also evolving that strategy to continue to make those products more unified in our product roadmap. So I think we're going to tie this particular session up. I know compliance isn't something that is right at the top of the list of our fun meter, but it's obviously very, very important for what we do. I think it makes it a little bit easier when you can have the right tools and the right capabilities to make it a little bit more easy to manage. So we're going to tee it up for some questions, and hope you'll enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks a lot.